engine start. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. Liftoff of space.
In our natural pursuit of knowledge, space has always mystified and beguiled us. Over the past 5 decades, we've pushed the final frontier inevitably onward into the ether. The cost has been colossal. Now every day, new data, new conclusions, and the thirst for deeper exploration propel us inexorably onward. The advantages of the discoveries made through space travel are myriad, but the fundamental curiosity as to what is out there will always fascinate and taunt us. Come with us now into the unknown and discover the disappearing frontier. Coming up in this edition, the early shuttle flights 5 to 8 proved not just the operational capacity of the shuttle, but also conducted many scientific experiments. Back in 1959, America had a dream to get into space. Today we look at the selection, development and training of the men chosen for Project Mercury, America's first manned space flights. These 7 men were rigorously tested, trained and tested again to prepare for that first bold step into the unknown. From early days and flamboyant daredevils to today's high-tech spacesuits, the search for the best and most flexible space pressure suit continues. The primary purpose of the early operational space shuttle flights was to effectively deliver and return satellites into Earth orbit, but they also conducted many valuable scientific experiments and were responsible for several other firsts in space. After making its first voyage into space on STS-4, the Continuous Flow Electrophoresis System, CFES, flew again on shuttle flights 6, 7 and 8. The device is a prototype of a production unit to purify material for the treatment of disease. Combined results from Flight 6 and 7 demonstrated that CFES could separate over 700 times more material and purify over 4 times that which could be achieved in Earth's gravity. Shuttle Flight 8 was the first of CFES to separate living cells. Some of the samples were separated to continue research at Pennsylvania State University and Johnson Space Center in Texas. Others were used to further diabetes research at Washington University Medical School, Missouri. Other scientific activity conducted on shuttle flights 5 through 8 focused, as the CFES had, on research and materials processing, greatly enhanced when performed in the weightlessness of space. The monodispersed latex reactor flown on shuttle flights 3 and 4 flew again on mission 6 and 7 in a continuing attempt to improve the production of polystyrene latex microspheres for cancer research and treatment and glaucoma research. 5 student experiments flew on the 4 flights as part of an annual science competition. Studies varied from fluid convection to sponge and crystal growth to biofeedback. A total of 23 getaway special canisters were flown on shuttle flights 5, 6, 7 and 8. Some contained stamped envelopes of the US Post Office commemorating spaceflight. Others grew snow, exposed seeds to zero gravity, and studied the effects of weightlessness on a colony of ants. NASA's Getaway Special Program was a unique opportunity to fly small, self-contained payloads on board shuttle on a space-available basis and at a very low cost. Perhaps the studies with the most human interest were those done on space adaptation syndrome, also known as space motion sickness, a malady which affects approximately half of all astronauts. The most expensive studies of SAS were done on Flight 8, focusing primarily on the neurological system. Oral sensitivities were tested as well as eye movements and repeated physical motion. Measurements were taken of limb volume and external tissue pressure. If any of these tests looked torturous, no wonder the crew dubbed the doctor's middeck working area a chamber of horrors, and mockingly gave him a taste of his own medicine. Astronaut crews got along very well with each other on missions 5, 6, 7 and 8, yet they were the largest, most diverse crews in the history of spaceflight. Flight 5 carried the first 4-person crew. Flight 6, calling themselves the Over-the-Hill Gang, tallied up all their experience to get a grand total of 111 years of aviation action. Flight 7 carried the first 5-person crew, including the first American woman to fly in space, appropriately named Sally Ride. Flight 8 included the first black American to fly in space, Gahan Bluford, and the oldest person to fly in space at that time, Dr. William Thorne. With ejection seats gone from the flight deck, and water storage tanks and instrumentation gone from the middeck, there was much more room to accommodate the larger crews. There was also opportunity for privacy, exercise, and as usual on any important trip, plenty of food. The success of Flights 5, 6, 7 and 8 represented many accomplishments for the Space Shuttle program. Most importantly, the missions proved the operational capability of the space transportation system, that useful work can be done in space for the benefit of people on Earth. As we now know, this was just the beginning, as NASA's fleet of shuttles, their astronauts and capabilities continue to grow. We go back now to those brave men who were the first to sit on top of an explosive rocket and be hurled headlong into the great unknown of space. At the time, in 1959, despite their heroics and grand plans, the realities of space were still largely unknown to the people of the fledgling space program. From exhaustive testing for things that they were not even sure existed, 7 men were chosen for America's first foray into manned space exploration, the Mercury project. Why must man attempt this adventure? Why venture into space? To explore his world, man has always risked the unknown, because it is unknown, and it is man's nature to know. This story looks at the beginnings of American manned space exploration. The problem of selecting pilots to represent the United States in space was approached from an uncompromising, hard scientific viewpoint. From all the active pilots in all the branches of the armed forces, the service records of 473 test pilots were selected for review. 110 met the basic qualifications. Each must be a graduate of an Army or Navy test pilot school, 1,500 hours of flight time, qualified in jet aircraft, have an engineering background, younger than 40 at the time of selection, and be 5'11" or less. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration asked 69 of the 110 officers who qualified to come to Washington for a briefing. They were interviewed, tested, and asked to volunteer for the Project Mercury mission. 6 were discovered to be too tall, 16 declined the opportunity, and 47 volunteered. 32 were asked to continue through a series of capability tests, which would indicate not the best men in the group, but the various degrees of qualification of each man. The successful candidates were put through a barrage of tests, not just the normal diagnostic tests, because as military pilots, these men were regularly checked, but also a range of dynamic tests designed to see how they operate under stress, both physical and mental. A complete profile of each pilot's physiology was mapped so that it could be compared by telemetry from space to Earth should they be on board one of the Mercury capsules. This microscopic approach gave the ground crew baseline information to compare against later flight data. This Project Mercury candidate is preparing for stress. The weight of 8 gravities will be thrust upon him as he rides the centrifuge. His reactions are studied and analyzed to see how he fared under multiple gravity forces. Did he show a tendency to pull back? Was his tolerance high or low? Would he do it again? Now his equilibrium would be tested. How does freezing water affect his pulse and blood pressure? And what about his mental equilibrium, his personality, his imagination, motivation? How does he see the problems of life? And what about his memory, visualization and comprehension? Ask him to describe himself in 100 different ways with a battery of tests. Make him walk up and down stairs for 5, 10 or 15 minutes until his muscles groan. Take him for a walk adjusting the slope until his heart beats 180 times per minute. These tests continued till all 32 men had been thoroughly evaluated in every way they could think of. Donald K. Slayton. Alan Shepard. Walter Schirra. Virgil Grissom. John Glenn. Leroy Cooper. And Malcolm Scott Carpenter. All names that would become legendary in the realms of space exploration. Then the 7 began the real training. They wanted to know all the answers and prepare as well as they could for any eventuality. The flight schedule included first instrumented capsules, then capsules with a monkey aboard, and then one of the 7 would go into space. Soon all the astronauts were busy qualifying themselves for space flight. They rode the centrifuges of the Army and Navy. They trained hard to increase their resistance to the forces of nature that would be pitted against them. Each new physical test or experience was backed up by hours of classroom work. The time had come to select the pressurized flight suit they would wear. All of the suits tested were air-conditioned and had an attachable helmet. They would also protect the astronauts from heat and the deafening 155 decibels of the blast off. The problem was to select a suit which had complete pressure integrity, which was resistant to temperature and was not too bulky. A suit which allowed comparative freedom of movement, yet a suit that was completely reliable. This modified Navy Mark IV suit worn by Shepard was selected for further testing. The physical testing and acclimatization of the astronauts continued. Here, the astronaut must learn to tolerate the heat he will encounter on re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. These quartz tube lights produce concentrated heat. Among the astronauts, each was assigned a specialist area of expertise, and he was responsible to the other crew members in that specialist field. Walter Schirra was charged with the special problem of studying the capsule environment, and it certainly looked like hot work. In the submarine carbon dioxide chamber at Bethesda, the astronauts learned that space medicine and submarine medicine have common problems. Under emergency conditions, there is the possibility of high amounts of carbon dioxide being generated within the capsule or the submarine's hull. After 2 hours in the chamber under 3% carbon dioxide, the men were tired, but at least they believed they would have the energy and sense to make a complete orbit of the Earth, and then to make an emergency re-entry and landing should the need arise. The parallels between underwater swimming and the pressures of spaceflight are numerous and easily apparent to the astronauts. To be able to take the physical punishment of astronaut training, these men must be conditioned like athletes, but with greater flexibility and greater mind and body toughness. As well as being excellent fitness training, swimming underwater accustoms the astronaut to a forced breathing discipline and closely approximates the condition of weightlessness which will be encountered in orbital flight. Now imagine, if you will, that this is the first Project Mercury launching from Cape Canaveral. At launch time, the manned capsule with its escape system is thrust into the sky by 2 booster engines and 1 sustainer engine. At an altitude of about 50 miles after just 2 minutes of flight, the booster engines are turned off and jettisoned. The sustainer engine continues its thrust toward orbital speed as the escape rocket fires, pulling the escape tower free of the capsule. Orbital speed will be achieved at about 100 miles altitude. Once in orbit, explosive bolts release the capsule. Separation rockets on the capsule will fire, pushing the capsule away from the Atlas. Now the capsule's automatic pilot will rotate the capsule. If the automatic pilot fails to respond or becomes erratic, the pilot has controls to maneuver the capsule into proper orbital attitude. Through his window, the pilot has a world-class view of the Earth laid out beneath him and the heavens above. Near the end of the 3rd orbit, when the capsule is several hundred miles west of the coast of California, the signal for re-entry is given. Retro rockets are fired, causing the capsule to leave its orbital path. Now man and capsule fall, plunging meteor-like toward the Earth through the atmosphere. The heat shield glows white-hot. Blunt end must be pointed to the line of fall. Below, patrol aircraft sweep the re-entry area with radar. At 10,000 feet, the main parachute extends and a small sonar bomb is released. The bomb, exploding some 3,000 feet under the ocean, provides the recovery vehicles with an accurate fix of the spot where the capsule is expected to land. When the capsule hits the water, the parachute is released and sea dye marker spreads out over the surface of the water. As the capsule floats to the surface, a signal light and automatic radio transmitter indicate the exact position. And so, with hard work, dedication, and a fearless approach, man was finally ready to begin his adventure in space. The flamboyant aviator Wiley Post provided the first real pressure suit when he flew his plane, the Woody May, on a series of high-altitude flights in 1935. Years later, many suits designed for space were still based on Post's design. There were even designs that never made it. This lunar model was developed at a time when it was uncertain if the moon's surface could support a person's weight. First spacesuits are direct adaptations of the Army and Navy's high-altitude pressure garments. John Glenn, America's first astronaut to orbit the Earth, used one of these pressure suits in his capsule, Friendship 7, in 1962. Later, astronaut Ed White made history as America's first spacewalker. Now, for the first time, the suits had to withstand the vacuum of space outside of our atmosphere and be able to protect the astronaut from extreme temperatures and micrometeorites. For the astronauts to land on the moon, a different set of functions was required. A fuller range of physical movement was necessary to carry out exploration of the moon's surface. These suits were custom-made. Each seam was tailored by hand. Gloves were molded directly from the hands of the astronauts. Cooling was provided by this liquid cooling undergarment. The suit consisted of a pressure barrier and multiple layers of thermal, micrometeorite and abrasion-resistant material. The shuttle required yet another spacesuit concept. This modular design can be adjusted to fit any astronaut. Today, there's much work underway at the Johnson Space Center, testing a zero-free breath suit, or ZBS, targeted for use on the International Space Station. In the underwater test facility that simulates space conditions, astronaut Jerry Ross test drives the suit while practicing the assembly of space station structures. This prototype suit eliminates the extensive pre-preparation of a suit required before working in space, as is done with the current shuttle suit. Not only will this be more efficient, but also the saving in time will allow astronauts to respond to emergencies immediately. However, there are trade-offs. Pressure inside the ZBS suit is approximately twice that in the shuttle suit. Dangerous pressure is harder to design for because the suit needs to be sturdy and joints need to be engineered so there's minimal resistance to movement. Across the country, another spacesuit designer at the Ames Research Facility in California is working on a suit using hard spacesuit technology, which may one day see application on the space station. The suit, designed by Vic Vicukal, can be entered from the rear and is built entirely of aluminium. Good material for space as it shields well against radiation and will stand up to the daily rigors of the space station. Through time, spacesuits have evolved from limited mobility systems to the present, where we're seeing more and more sophistication for use on the space station and beyond.